So the birds of prey are pretty frequent in your area.
Yeah, usually I get falcons and Cooper hawks. So it's kind of a seasonal thing, but my season's kind of longer than some seasons.
Yeah, yeah, that's hard. We were just talking with a guy who does who flies. He's a falconer, and we were talking with him about it. And it's kind of rough when they make the nationals the same time as the migration of the birds of prey.
Yeah, exactly. And for where I'm at, the predators in the surrounding mountains, they migrate to where I live, you know what I mean? Instead of going all the way down. Once the snow's on the hills, it's really thick with predators down here because it doesn't snow.
You belong to a roller club up there?
Yeah, we have a local roller club called the Tri-County Flyers, and it's this year was kind of, like I said, I didn't fly this year because I just was getting creamed by the predators. I lost like the first 60 birds I bred, I lost 54 of them.
Wow, man, that is a lot.
That was horrible. Yeah, I had like 3 pairs of Coopers on my street.
Yeah, they know where all the pigeon flyers are, I swear.
I have a whole family of Harrises that are playing. They don't bother me too bad, but I did lose one a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm thinking of good. I got a pair of ravens that live here pretty much all year long now. But the problem is, at first they used to live in a tree like right by my house, and they'd kind of keep the hawks away. But now they've kind of migrated to a different, a few blocks away, like a few blocks north. So they originally were staying in this certain tree, and it kind of helped. At first they were like attacking my birds when they first showed up, but then as I got used to them, it was just mostly they keep the hawks at bay, the Cooper hawks mostly. You can't do much about falcons, but these falcons up here tend to attack kind of low, low to the ground. They come in about 200 feet, and then I don't know, I heard they're like prairie falcons or hybrids.
Yeah. I've heard about that. Yeah, with a hybrid dose specifically, so they stay lower specifically for kind of taking out pigeons in the city and stuff like that.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not sure exactly. I just know one year I had attacked by these 2 falcons, and it took me about 3 months before I figured out it was a couple falcon guys doing it.
Oh no!
And one of them was like north of me, and the other one was south of me. Because the weird thing was, usually when you got a pair of falcons, they can come attack at the same time. So this was a male and a female, but neither one of them was in the air at the same time. And when they'd go to land, they'd land down below the tree line. So, which was really odd,
Yeah.
Because wild falcons just come in and leave the same way they come in, usually. Something like that. But they're really odd, the way they attacked. And then the more I start thinking about it, I think it was some falcon guys, because what tipped me off about it was a couple of Homer guys that live about a mile east of me. And one of them had called me, and he said, "Hey, I just want to give you a heads up. There's a falcon guy that lost one of his falcons. He wants to know if you see any falcon that's acting weird in your area." I didn't even know we had falcon guys in the area, Yeah. So anyway, that got me thinking about it. Then I called Fish and Game and all that. It took me about 6 months before I figured it out. And then I got a hold of the guy that's in charge of that. It's an independent club in California that registers all the falcon people. I think it's called like Hawkeye or something like that. The Fish and Game hand that over to them, and then they just audit them once in a while,
Yeah.
So they don't have to operate it. And so once I got to the head of one of those guys, it kind of just stopped, because I was one step away from joining their club so I could get their address, you know what I mean?
That's right.
That ended for them, but I still have the regular falcons,
Yeah, right. That's enough.
Yeah, because one pair just took me for like 15 right in a row.
That's hard.
And I was ready to just hang it up for the season. That was like the middle of July. It's just like, man, every time I let them out, I'm getting whacked.
How many do you breed for the year?
I think I banded like 98 birds, I think, this year. But I donated a whole bunch of them to some auctions.
Off of how many pair?
I used 11 pairs this year.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they're going out here.
Well, they're going, I usually breed from December till usually around July.
Dave, what do you think? How's he sound to you?
He sounds a little echoey, like kind of background.
How about that?
That's better right there. I feel like
that's better, yeah.
You're whispering sweet nothings into my ear with that. I like
that. Nice? You guys are friendly around here, let me tell you.
Let's open this up. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. I'm Phil.
And I'm Chris.
And today we got with us the author of the books Birmingham Roller, a high-performance pigeon, and the book Breeding Performing Pigeons, Dave Henderson. You can find both these books on Amazon. I'm sure the serious roller guys already know about it, but if you don't, that's where you can get it. And Dave, thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's get into some the background with it. When you got into pigeons, did you start off with rollers?
Yeah, when I started out with pigeons, I started out with rollers, actually. It was kind of not really for me. It was my older brother was always getting in trouble. And some guy my dad worked with said, yeah, I had the same problem. And, my dad got me into pigeons and I stayed out of trouble. He kind of got them for my brother. The guy had rollers. He had some other show birds, but they were kind of like high maintenance, like fantails or something. Okay. And our pigeon pen at the time that we built was your basic, like a 4x8 with a dirt floor and all, you know what I mean? Nothing, not really a roomy kind of thing, because I was like 10 years old.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so it was like I liked to look at them, but it was like he put them in, I had a few in my pen. I took them back to the guy because their tails were getting ruffled up, and it was just not really a good environment for like a show kind of pigeon. So we just stick with the rollers. And another flying breed too was I don't remember, some kind of tippler or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because the guy had probably like 8 or 9 breeds, something like that. And initially, I think he was just thinking we would take a little bit of each. But we only took about 8 pigeons, and then only took my brother about maybe a month. He's like, yeah, I don't like this shit, you know what I mean? So I ended up kind of liking it. And so it's kind of evolved from there. And then I discovered, some more roller guys. So, because I didn't, it's just kind of like anybody else. You think all rollers are the same, But this guy's rollers that I had were basically like a tumbler. And then I stumbled onto guys that actually had real rollers,
Same thing happened to me. I started with 80 rollers that I resettled. Then I found real rollers.
Yeah, so it's a kind of an eye-opening thing. So then you're like, wow, there's different kinds of rollers and different qualities to them. Immediately drawn to the ones that performed a lot better, and then once I saw a real fast roller, I was kind of hooked on the fast rollers, and from there it kind of evolved into, instead of seeing one roller go together, I kind of like seeing 10 of them go together,
Right. Was there any hard lessons that you had to learn on this journey that you've been doing it since you were 10? I mean, what was one of the harder lessons that you've come across learning?
It was kind of a natural hobby for me because I'm not really a real social person. I'm kind of competitive though, so I wanted to do as best as I could do with the resources I had. I was always striving to get better birds, and that's kind of what just keeps me going. The breeding of the pigeons is like a passion for me.
Yeah,
learning how to breed better, get more higher percentages out of the birds and stuff like that.
Can you talk on the circle breeding and the pretzel breeding? And
I first discovered the thing that really, because what happened was I was out of rollers for about 4 years when I went in the Army. The whole time I was away from the birds, that's all I could think about was the birds, And then so I just kind of studied different things and tried to find different roller books, but I pretty much looked at all the roller books back then, So I just kind of had to evolve to some of the racing pigeon books that talked about breeding and stuff like that. Some of the methods would be transferable to any breed, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And because we're just talking about, you know, basically you put two birds in that possess the traits you want, hoping to get the same kind of bird out, you know, it's kind of the same thing. But one of the things that I really noticed a lot when I had the birds prior to that was that it seemed like my female pigeons were the better birds. I wasn't really sure about why that was. Looking back, I think it's probably just the particular strain of pigeons I had, maybe. I don't think they're all strains are the same. Like these South African birds I have, more of the cocks were better initially. As I further researched that, it comes to find out that, which a lot of people might not know this, but they discovered it years ago back in the 50s. When you start the line breed birds to a particular pigeon, so you have like one really good producer and you mate it to multiple mates. As the pedigree starts to pile on, the more times that bird shows up on the pedigree, the more times it'll breed more of that sex. Like it doesn't become a 50-50 thing anymore.
I got you.
So you'll get a lot more like two males in the nest and stuff like that. And if you do the opposite, then you'll get more times you'll get two females in the nest, you know, if you're line breeding to the hens. Okay. And so I always like hens better anyway. They're kind of easier to manage.
Well, if you're line breeding to the hens, that's going to give you what, isn't it hen makes the cock, isn't that how it goes?
For what do you mean by?
Well, I've always heard that the hen builds the barn and the rooster paints it.
Well, I don't know. I kind of just, it's kind of weird, but for me, I always like to move the birds around. You know, I'll move a good bird around on multiple mates until I find something that works, you know?
Makes sense.
And then once you have a cousin, I always call it like a cousin line. But once you're circle breeding, because they're all related, you end up you set a bunch of traits in those cousins that will transfer on almost any mate you pair them up to. So that's like the advantage to it. You don't have any more bad matings, you know what I mean? They're all pretty good. So the only real throwbacks you might experience would be sometimes color, maybe. Like you might get a long throwback of a color or something that's not normal. But once you set the type, you know, if you select birds that fly right, that just kind of, and then you only pick birds that fly a certain way, it all kind of falls in place, because it all starts with how they fly. Right. If you allow them to have bad habits, like a lot of guys don't pay attention, and so the birds end up developing bad habits when they're young, and then you can't get rid of it when they're old. You know, that has to do with changing direction and flying like a figure eight. You know, so I think a lot of pigeons will do that, but people don't realize that you have to select the birds to do it. Sometimes birds are lazier or weaker. They're not, you know, physically developed as much as another pigeon, so they'll be weaker and want to fly in the inside all the time, and it forces the other birds to do that. You end up having to figure out what bird's causing it so that the rest of them can get back to business.
So would you just pull that bad bird out of that kit?
Yeah, what I do is I end up usually I'll take a camera and I'll take a bunch of pictures as the birds are turning in a circle. I'll take a bunch of pictures and see if I can identify certain birds in a series of pictures that's always in the middle and the inside, you know. Oh, and if it ends up being like multiple birds have the same color in there, then I can just take out all of them that are that color and then see if they start flying normal again. Slowly, one at a time, you just add the one back, you know, you add one of those other ones back and see how it works. Usually I can spot them right away. There'll be like some kind of subtle color difference, like maybe right under the wings, it'll have like a blue stripe or something on the bone where the bones are, you know, have like a white feather, like right in the rump area where the other ones don't have it the same. So there's little subtle things you might tell when you're looking at them multiple times, and that's what I usually. So then you move. Basically, once you identify that weaker bird, he might not be a cull, but you just move him down to a weaker kit that's still not as developed, you know.
Yeah. And what about you're saying with birds that have had bad training? Is there any real way to correct some of that bad behavior with a kit that's kind of had a bad start?
Well, what you got to do is you just got to do the best you can to pull them out, and if it keeps occurring, you just have to cull it, you know, or because it could be something else. It could be the bird's blind in one eye or something, and you may not realize it. Because if a bird's blind in one eye, it'll only fly one direction, you know. So that's something people don't realize a lot of times. It could even be deaf even or something, you know what I mean? So that's some of the things you run into if you start line breeding. You'll find weird defects that you don't really notice.
Yeah.
But you just know the bird's not, you know, he's not flying right, you know what I mean? You just know right away.
I never
usually you'll
thought
find
of deafness in a bird.
Same here. That's new.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it's really tough to know, you know what I mean? It's a hard thing to identify. So it's, like I say, you just usually spot them. You can spot these birds usually when you're training them when they're first babies, because they're like a little slower, or they're just not quite all there, you know what I mean? So they got some kind of, that's the way I usually spot them. So it's usually pretty easy to tell later on, because there'll be ones that's some kind of genetic defect or something.
Gotcha. Hey, Dave.
You know?
My friend Ricky, he sent me a message the other day, and he may be just pulling my leg, but he said, ask you about your article on mitochondrial DNA.
Yeah, I've written a few of them now. It's kind of a new, it's kind of a new science for pigeons, but it's even newer for people. Basically, if you go on there and research it, you're going to find a lot more data now. They're discovering that Olympians, like human athletes, a lot of them will have mitochondrial mutations, and that's kind of what makes them be like a special athlete. They've mapped out the human genome. They can tell when there's a mutation. So it's like they do blood tests and stuff. But so they're saying that the human athletes that have the highest amount of mutations is a sprinter, like a 100-yard dash or something guy.
Wow.
And then the next one I think is like powerlifting. I think it is. But anyway, they've been able to map it out. So that's why you see like certain body types of people will dominate some sports, you know, because they have like a perfect body type and the metabolism to go with it, you know what I mean? How that is with the pigeons too. So it's like if you ever had pigeons long enough, that's a performing pigeon, like maybe racing pigeon or a roller. Once in a while you get one of these superstars that it's just like way better than the average bird, you know?
Right.
And what we always used to call it back in the day was hybrid vigor. I don't know if you guys ever heard that term, but they called it hybrid vigor all the time when I was a kid, you know, and growing up and everything. And they always said, yeah, it always occurs when you cross two different families of birds together.
They say that.
And you can't
chickens too.
Yeah, and that could be why you have hybrid chickens too, you know what I mean? But it's like, I think the chickens I got are these black sex links, and they're supposed to lay more eggs and all that sort of thing. And so as you do a lot, I mean, we could talk about this thing for weeks, but it's like you contact scientists, because really the hybrid vigor, the most common ways hybrid vigor is seen is in like plants, across like two species of corn or something. And the difference is like with
and it becomes
real
a
hybrid,
GMO.
Yeah, then you got GMO. But anyway, the way the hybrid vigor really works in the real world is it increases usually in body size and stuff like that. It's not a performance factor, you know what I mean? So it's like when you cross like two different cows, you're looking to get a cow that has more meat or something on it. So whenever hybrid vigor is really referenced, it's really on animals that you eat, you know what I mean? So it's really not a performance characteristic. So that's why when I first read this article from a Canadian racer pigeon guy, anyway, he's got a website. It's like Silvio Farms or something like that. So he's been real helpful. He wrote this article. Somebody sent it to me, and then I read it, and I was like, wow, it's kind of long. It's about, I don't know, 16 or 18 pages. So it's kind of hard to go through the whole thing. But basically, when I read it, kind of like opened my eyes to everything that I suspected about females in the mating. Just like completely eye-opening, and more research. It just drew me to do more research on it, you know. If you just Google it, it's called like mitochondrial DNA and about the significance of the maternal line or something like that. Like
you said, it kind of opened your eyes to what you were already thinking about when it came to breeding with your hens. So did you make some changes as far as how you're doing your line breeding?
Well, what it opened up is mainly for me anyway, what it told me was how to identify what birds are throwing defects. You know what I mean? Like, okay. Because there's certain characteristics of the birds that will only come from the female. And when you have those birds and it's not acting normal, it's kind of like, I don't know, you could say maybe it's mentally challenged pigeon because it doesn't act like a normal pigeon. It's slower and it doesn't learn as quickly or something, you know what I mean? And so they discover that like the mitochondrial is actually like, it's inside every cell of the body, but the organs are the ones that get the highest amount of them. So it's like the brain, the heart, the lungs, the liver, you know, the intestines, all that stuff that makes the body operate. It gets a higher percentages of the mitochondrial D.N.A. It's just called mitochondria is what it is. They first discovered it or started talking about it with like race horses, and they'd say, you might have heard something like this. They say, yeah, you know, this certain race broke all the records, and when the horse of old age or whatever, they biopsy it, you know what I mean? So they would check the organs and all that, and they say, you had a 30% larger lung capacity or something of that sort of thing, you know what I mean? You know, which, and other times, you know, it could be the lactic, you know, like how your muscles get tired from lactic acid, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And sometimes animals will be, they won't absorb it the same level, so they don't get tired, you know what I mean? So there's a whole bunch of different mutations that can occur in animals that would cause them to be a higher performer. So like one thing they talk about with the racing pigeons is, you know, they race 300 miles and then a lot of times the guys will have to rest them for a week before they race them again, you know. But if you get the right bird that has all the stamina, you know, they might call it stamina, but really what it is it's possessing like a better organ function, you know what I mean? It might not be a mutation at all. It might be just that particular family was developed with that trait, you know what I mean? It may have started out being a mutation, but after you line breed to a mutation, it becomes a normal. That's kind of how it starts. So once you develop a family, that's where I'm talking about, where you develop a strain of pigeons or a line of pigeons that's based on a key pigeon, like one specific key pigeon. And the thing about it is, if it's a male, he's not going to be able to pass on that same level of vigor that a female can pass on, because he doesn't have the ability to pass on the mitochondrial. It only from the female. It's like the power, it's the vitality of the pigeon comes from the mitochondria. The high vigor.
Question I've ever asked.
No, that's the coolest answer right there. I mean, you're making some X-Men superhero pigeons, but I mean, that's really cool.
Well, it's crazy because for me, it's like kind of interesting, because if you think about all the ins and outs of what it does, it can kind of fill in kind of the blank. So it'd be like if you had a really good male. This explains, you know, the other part of it. Like sometimes you get a pair of pigeons and they could be crosses or whatever, but they produce you like this really exceptional pigeon that just blows everybody away. Like like you can't even imagine. It's just like surpasses both parents, and you're like, yeah, well, this bird's got hybrid vigor or whatever. But in reality, it just has a mutated mitochondria. You know, it's got a higher number of mitochondria in the cells that makes it perform better. And if it's a male pigeon, he'll never reproduce what he is. You know what I mean? So that's what people don't think about. And so a lot of times these guys will, like racing pigeons, they'll cross families on purpose just to compete, like a one loft race or something. And they'll never want to buy the bird back because they just assume you can't do anything with it. You know what I mean? Because it's not going to breed true. That's
So
kind of
it's
how
like
they.
a battle cross.
Yeah, battle cross. Yeah, they call it competition crosses or whatever. So a lot of people have determined that, yeah, these birds are worthless. You know, they're just good for the race. As soon as the race is over, I get my money. I sell it for $1,000, and then I don't care about getting the bird back because it's not going to breed anyway. You know what I mean? That's kind of, but for me, it's like if I create a pigeon like that, I want to strive to be able to create another pigeon like it, you know?
Right.
You know, out of that pigeon, and all things point to the hen being the key to the whole thing. So, because I've done interviews with guys who actually bought some of these crosses and interviewed them about, because somebody had said, yeah, this guy developed a good family based off of a single hen. And so I get their number or something, or their email or something, and I question them about stuff. And a lot of them don't even realize that it's sex related. You know what I mean? They're just like, oh yeah, I just bought this bird and it just turns out to be really good.
Just got lucky.
You know, and yeah, but in all the cases of these hen lines that they created, all of them were crossed hens, but they were all able to develop a good performing family using a hen. But guys that use crossed males weren't able to do the same. You know, have like the base to the bird. You know what I mean? You got to have something you can build on with the bird. You know what I mean? You got to have the background of it and all that. But like I said, I've tried doing different ways. It just seems to be easier to do it from a hen because it's just more. It takes longer because hens, you know, they're more monogamous. You know, they're not going to jump anything that moves. You know what I mean? So they're a lot harder to deal with, but I think the reward at the end ends up being
you can control it too.
Yeah, plus and then where the circle breeding comes in to the whole thing is, you say for example, if my main bird is a hen, I'll have siblings, or not, sometimes it's a sibling of her, or maybe a half sibling, or I'll obviously have kids off of her that are good. And you interbreed them to see if any of those birds have that same kind of ability to reproduce, you know, like the mom. And when you discover another someone that's directly related to her that does the same, then you can build another line off that particular pigeon. And then you might intermingle the breed, you know, the birds off each other, but you got to keep them separate. You know what I mean? So even though the supporting cast, like all the other pigeons, say like you got 4 lines in your family, which would be like 4 circles in your family. So each circle has its main key bird, but all the other supporting birds can go to either circle. You know what I mean? Either you can intermix, developing it like that. You just take it back in. So you could just start each line with 1 pair of pigeons.
That's interesting. I definitely.
Well, the thing about it is, it's like it's you almost got to write it down to see how it gets complicated. You know what I mean? When you say once you created those lines, and you kind of know how the lines work. You know, so that's why pedigrees don't really mean nothing to anybody except for who created it. So because they're the only ones that know how it works. You know.
And what they were going for too. I mean, if you can get a trait that you can replicate, I mean, that's really what it comes down to, as far as
it's all about replicating. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how the whole cousin thing started for me. Started out my original family. I did it with them, where I had the mother and I had 3 daughters of her, and those were all the cousins. Those all had their own cousin lines. And I had like a brother to my foundation hen, a sister. I had 2 other first cousins, and you just intermingle them together. But at the same time, you focus on that bird as the producer of that. And after you go about, what usually happens, you keep the circle tight for about 3 years, 3 generations. You only keep the circle among those pigeons, and then you'll take a key pigeon, maybe it might be the best pigeon of the season, and then you'll mix it over the next 3 years. You'll mix it with the other cousin lines, so you can add that diversity back into the other ones. And the whole idea is that you don't end up, because it's a really progressive system, meaning that you're always producing good birds all the time. And so what happens is you automatically want to bring in more good birds, or the fresher crop, or whatever you want to call it. Want to bring them in because it'll progress. But at that same time, then that means you got to get rid of another pigeon to make room for that pigeon. So it's like, so if you get rid of pigeons before you can properly evaluate them, then you kind of screw yourself over. So that's what happens is if you keep it like only one circle, like most of the time I do like 3 circles in 3 cousin circles. I try to keep about 3, and then I'm experimenting with a couple other ones at the same time. And but if you only take it down to one uniform group, and it's progressing fast, if you get rid of the wrong pigeon, then it sets you back forever, because you have to have the right pigeons every time. If you just have one circle, you're to pick the absolute right pigeon every time. But if you have multiple circles, those circles support the other ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'd be like me giving you 5 pairs of pigeons and another guy 5 pairs of pigeons, and we all breed them separately, and then we share birds. That sort of behavior builds families of birds, not the opposite. And so that's kind of, you can expand it like that too. So if I have 3 cousin lines here, my friend Tim might have 2 cousin lines there. Keith, he might have 3 cousin lines at his place, and they're all related. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it gives you like diversity, Yeah,
you don't get that genetic bottleneck as it was.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If you concentrate too tight, it kind of will screw you over, because you always have to make the perfect choice. You always have to be right on the money. And what if you lose the best bird that you should have stocked? You lost it to a hawk, and that might have been the only one that would have helped you that year.
So I'm going to assume that you keep good records. Can you describe to me the records you keep?
Basic records I have like a clipboard that has all my breeding records on there. Each pair has its own page. As I create more babies from those pairs, I write them down on the list. And then I have a notebook that I have just out in my pigeon cage. And if I identify a bird that is doing poorly or doing good or standing out to me, then I'll make little notes in there. And then I'll if I don't know what bird it is, I'll just make a note, that, hey, this red checker with one white feather on the wing is looking really good. And then I'll keep watching that bird. And as I identify the bird, then I'll be able to do more notes, And basically, it's either a bad note or a good note. So it's either the bird's not doing good or the bird's doing good. If it's not doing anything, I'm not going to keep a note on it until it starts doing good. It's kind of like the same thing like I was talking to Keith London today, and I was saying that with the mitochondrial, the normal way that you discover there's a mutation is because it's a negative effect. And that's the same how it is for people. So like if you get diabetes and it's from your mitochondrial, you're only going to learn about it because the doctor said, yeah, you have a mitochondrial disease that caused diabetes. So it causes all kinds of diseases, you know, but they're all usually a negative effect. But now they're starting to identify them as a positive thing. That's where the Olympian part comes in. Those kind of things all go together. So it's kind of just got to watch all the traits. It's when the bird starts to roll, when it starts to have a problem kidding, handle the bird and see if you can see any physical issues with the bird. Might be it's molting, or it's just only eating Milo or something, you know. So sometimes if birds are only eating Milo, they drop body weight really quick.
Okay.
And they'll end up having problems. So you got to make sure they're eating right. So there's a whole bunch of different aspects that could be why they're doing what they're doing. And then some of it's just maybe just a bad pigeon. I mean, so.
Well, we're coming up against the clock. We got probably time for one more question. Chris, do you want to hit him up with one more?
Can you describe your fly routine, your daily routine, or weekly or bi-monthly or whatever you got?
Well, what I usually do is I fly the young birds every day. And like I said, I manage the way they fly, so I know that they're developing correctly as flyers. Give them, you want the feeding too. I guess give them about a tablespoon each, you know what I mean? And I use a mixed grain. It's like Milo, wheat, little peas, and safflower. That's basically what it is. I tried, when they're in weaning, I try to make sure they're eating all those grains. So if they're not eating all those grains, then I have one of these round pellets. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're like a round. Farina makes them. There's one made by Winter's Cup that's called extruded. And I keep these round pellets.
I used Missouri for a little bit. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, but I use them only so the birds will learn how to eat everything. So if you notice some of them are just eating the wheat or just the Milo, then you just replace it with those round pellets for about a week, and then they'll start eating everything. You know what I mean? So once they're physically good, you know what I mean, then that's when you know they're going to fly and eat right and everything. And I just fly them every day. I try to fly them just, you know, after work or maybe before I go to work or something. And if they start flying over an hour, then I'll cut the feed back. But I hardly ever have them fly less than 45 minutes. So.
Okay.
But I'd like to keep them about at 45 minutes to an hour. That way they build a lot of endurance and everything.
Right.
And then once they begin to roll, they have the muscle to control it, kind of, you know what I mean? Because like I said, when the bird gets too skinny or it's malnutrition, the bird will do a lot of weird things that you don't expect it to do. And like I said, I try to correct it when I see it, but sometimes it might be too late. Maybe it already picked up bad habits that you can't fix.
Right.
You know what I mean? But you want to move it out. If you have a problem bird, you always want to move it out as soon as you spot it, so you can figure out what's wrong with it. And then I usually just move that bird automatically down to another kid that's weaker, thinking that he'll be stronger in that kid. And maybe and I think it's the real thing is I think the pigeons really have a confidence. So some birds are more personable. You know, they kind of express like they like you or something, like pigeons. You know what I mean? You can see the personalities kind of if you pay attention. So I think that's part of it too, is like the bird will be a confident pigeon. And if it's not a confident pigeon, then it might have issues. It may be that one of the pigeons is picking on it when it's in the kit box or something, and that might affect it. But, you know, it's really difficult to pin it down unless, you know, you're the only one that can figure that out. Go through the list of things that it could be. I mean, it'd be just like if your car were heated or something, you say, well, I can do this or that. It's got to be this, maybe the same thing. So you just have to learn how to spot those things.
Oh, for sure.
But basically that's what, and once the birds start to, once I have the babies start to show a short spin, you know, like 3 or something like that, then I'll start flying them every other day. And I'll separate out the ones that are rolling and fly them together, and then keep the ones that aren't rolling yet still together and flying them every day. So that's kind of how I do it. I try to fly the ones rolling at least 4 or 5 times a week, you know. And I think what happens is it'll slow down their development a little bit, but not enough that they won't mature, because all of them are rolling. And it's like birds that roll make other birds roll. It's like they want to do it together.
Yeah, right. It's
so,
nice when they work together.
Yeah, so that's kind of like, that's a really easy trick to get young birds to come in early, is you can just fly them with a few mature hens that already spin. And as they're spinning, the babies pick it up quicker. Kind of like a monkey see, monkey do. And then those birds will emulate what they're doing. It's kind of the fastest way to get some rollers to develop, is to fly them with other birds that roll. But like I said, well, you could do 2 or 3 parts on this thing, because we got a lot of stuff we could talk about. I mean,
yeah, the Ricky even told me, he's like, you know, he knows his stuff. You might have to do a part 2 on this. I'm like,
part 3.
Part 3 or 4, you know, just.
I know, when I did the one with Jerry Chacon, I think it was like 2 hours long, and we only got like halfway through. You know what I mean? So it's really, if you have a passion and stuff, you study. That's the difference. And like I said, it's just because I have like a competitive nature. I think it's like I don't want to half-ass anything. Like I said, the biggest passion I have is raising the babies and pairing up the birds. So it takes, like, I've been working on how to pair up my next 10 pairs for the last month. I've been looking at which ones I want to pair up, you know. I think I got 6 out of the 10. I got 6 out of the first 10 on paper written down, really good to go. And I still have 4 more to go. And then I'm gonna have more than 10, but I'm gonna start out with 10, and then I'm gonna add like 5 more after.
Okay.
Because I just can't. I had some just bred too long this year. Like, I was able to donate a couple babies to Ricky's auction he just had down there, and the only reason is because I forgot to put the dummy eggs under them and they hatched. You know what I mean?
Well, it worked out. I mean, good birds, you know.
I wouldn't have had anything to give them, you know what I mean? So that kind of worked out for him. So the birds are about 2 weeks old. Oh, did you? Yeah. So I guess the guy that bought them was from New Mexico or something, I think. Because I just got the notice from the club about it.
Nice.
I tried to buy some weavers.
Oh, some Alan Weaver birds?
Yeah, it didn't make any sense because Alan's taking very good care of me. But I was
well, it's kind of a support thing, you know what I mean? You just want to support the effort, and so it's like, yeah, he might give me birds, but now I can actually give him, $100 and help the club out or whatever. I'll at least donate a book or something. Like, I just got, like I said, that I discovered, though, this is really weird. We were talking about the hawks. So the whole first of the year, I got killed by the hawk. I was ready to shut it down in the middle of July. And I was like, man, I can't let nothing out. They're just killing me. So then I had all these babies, building up in my kit boxes. Usually I donate to these donations for auctions and stuff for clubs. They're usually late round birds because I can't usually fly them that late. Like, train them, because the Cooper hawks just eat them like candy.
Yeah. So
those are the ones I usually like to donate. And I ended up donating like 27 birds this year, and that's like over a kit of birds, So, I mean, out of the 98 or whatever I banded, that's a lot of birds,
It is.
So I did some to my own club too, so it's just how it is. I mean, I was gonna have a shitty year anyway, so I didn't really care either way, you know what I mean? I think I gave maybe a dozen birds away to guys around the end of June, because I just said, no, way I'm going to be able to train these things. But then my friend Don here, he gave me like 10 babies in July, and he says, yeah, just try it out and see if you can do anything. I said, I don't know, I've never done it, So I put out the 10 babies after I had them locked up for 2 weeks, and I was able to fly them. I couldn't believe it. It was like, oh my gosh. So then I'm like, man, if I wouldn't have gave away all those birds, I maybe would have had a kid. I'm like, because I always start getting wiped out in July, and so it just kind of programmed me to not train birds after July. It's just one of those weird things. You can't ever predict it. You know, like last year, I think I lost 39 birds, and the year before I lost around 40 something.
Man.
I'm usually it's usually like a ratio of like usually around 30 or 40%, you know?
Yeah.
Here for me. And mostly because I'm in a residential area, and all the west side of where my birds are is just nothing but trees for about 100 yards. It's just pure trees.
Yeah.
So those Cooper hawks can hide in there, you know, and ambush them. But I use like a landing tower, and you guys might try that if you have any hawks, because it really works really well for Cooper hawks. So I have a landing tower that I built with like two 12-foot 2x4s, okay. And I butt jointed them in the middle, and so it's like 21 feet tall. So there's a 3-foot butt joint in the middle where they're screwed together. Uh-huh. And then I got a platform on the top that's like 2 foot wide and 5 feet long. And it's just made with a 1x2 frame and a 2x4 that goes through the middle of it. And then I use that and just screw it down on the top of the other 2x4s, you know. And it works perfect for saving them from those ambushes, because it's above the house, you know what I mean? Because it's 21 feet. So it's high enough where they can see stuff coming from most directions. Huh. Because when they're down on the ground behind something, they can't see it coming. So I'll have some land on the kit boxes and some land on the tower. And if the ones in the tower take off, then it tells the other ones, hey, there's a Cooper hawk here, you know what I mean? So you guys, you know, if you have problems like that, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can send you some pictures.
Yeah, that'd be
and just I'll send it to your Facebook, I guess, for you.
Yeah, that'd be good if you could put it up there. I'm sure you guys would like to see it.
It works really good. I mean, and I have a cage too that I have a pulley on the top of it, mounted to a like a 12-inch square shelf bracket. You know, like just a normal 12-inch by 12-inch shelf bracket. Uh-huh. You can screw on the wall, and so I mount that underneath, and I have a ring up there with a pulley. And so I made a pulley system where I could pull up a cage up there and train the babies so they can see the surrounding area.
Oh, that is genius.
It works perfect. Genius. It just works perfect, yeah.
I have a tower.
And I did it.
Set it up right now.
I tried it with rope. You don't want to use rope though, so I had to get some 1/4-inch or maybe 1/8 inch. I don't know, 1/4 or 1/8 inch cable. I got it over at Harbor Freight Tools, and it worked perfect because the rope eventually wore out, you know what I mean? So you use like a light rope maybe that you'd use for like a clothesline or something.
Yeah.
And it just wears out after a while because it gets sun bleached and all that kind of stuff. So the cabling works really good. So you guys I'll send you pictures though, and you guys can check it out because it's really a worthy thing to have. I got a lot of the UK guys to have towers like that, but they usually use like a TV antenna sort of thing. And it also stops birds from bumping the ground when they're coming into land too. It kind of does both.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
if you could put a picture up on our Facebook, man, that would be really cool. I think a lot of guys would
I'll do that.
Do something like that.
Yeah, I'll do it, and I'll put the dimensions of it. So it's super easy to make, but the main thing is you want to use kiln dried 2x4s, and you paint it so that way that doesn't warp and everything, you know?
Oh yeah, just being out in the elements for sure.
Yeah, because if you use a wet wood, then it dries out and it'll warp. You want to get a kiln dried one at Lowe's, I think.
Okay.
But they're 12 foot. You can get them longer. Redwood would probably work better, but I just use like kiln dried. I think it's like hem fir or something like that. And it's lighter too. So I just use like one of those little small 8-inch square bricks, you know, the kind you build like walls with, and you fill it full of cement.
Yeah.
Those little open ones. You just use one of those and you put it in the ground, and then you just put some rocks in there, and then you just slide it in there, and then you just screw it right on the eave of your cage, you know, right on the roof eave. It's really light. It doesn't. I had to use like 1/2 inch by 1 inch wire on the top. You don't want to use a solid top on there because the wind will blow it off. So it has friction against the wind. So you have to use a wire top on it. I first used the 1/2-inch hardware cloth, but they'd get their foot caught in it all the time. So I switched over to the 1/2-inch by 1-inch.
Yeah.
That seemed to work a lot better. So
I really appreciate the talk that you gave on the line breeding and the hen, and it's always been kind of a crapshoot for me sometimes when you're trying to get a result, but I think you explained a pretty good way of getting something that you could replicate. Yeah. So that was really good, man.
Well, here's another thing I can add on that really quickly is that, so say like the hen, and the thing with a cock and a hen is they have, a cock has 2 Z chromosomes, they call it, and a hen only has 1 Z chromosome. Okay. So what happens is, say like the hen is a dominant bird over all the cocks you've ever bred her to, and she's producing, so you can key her as the producer. So what you do is you produce a good cock that's a son of her, and then you pair it back up to mom, and then you try to create a cock bird that's carrying both Z's that come from the mom. Because what happens is the mom will only pass the Z to her sons, and the dad only passes it to the daughters. But the daughters only have 1 and the male has 2. Okay. So that's the equation there. So what you're looking for is you take a cock that's off the mom, and you're trying to produce a cock that has 2 of her Z's, 2 Z's that came from her. Because the genes aren't going to mix. They're not going to mix. I mean, you're not going to lose the gene, because her Z chromosome carries her chromosomes in a specific order. And if she's dominant, that means that more of her chromosomes are trumping the cock's chromosome.
Right.
And if you get 2 of those, that means that cock's going to breed true like he is, instead of not being true, because he's going to carry 1 from the dad and 1 from the mom. The male does. So half the time he might produce like the mom, and the other half he might produce like the dad. But if you get one that produces like mom, that's a cock, he's like worth his weight in gold, because he's going to produce high percentages on any hen you put it on. Usually comes about the 3rd generation when you start line breeding. It'll come in that period of time. So, but like I say, it's just the luck of the draw. You never know what Z is going to show up. But the easiest way to spot is if the bird looks like mom. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
If the male looks like mom, then he's probably got 2 of her Z genes. You know what I mean? Yeah. Her Z chromosomes. So, anyway, guys.
Yeah. No, Dave. Thanks. We definitely got to sit down and do another talk, man. This has been really great. All of our listeners are very good, proficient breeders.
If it works out, just collect a bunch of questions, and we'll just try to do it like that. You know?
This has been really good, man. Thanks for coming on with us.
Yeah.
And sharing some of this with us. This has been great.
No problem. Yeah. It's nice you guys are sharing it with the world too, you know? So
that's right.
It all works the same. So promote the pigeons.
Yeah. That's right. Yep, absolutely. That's what we're all about.